Roll for initiative. Or maybe don't, actually, because there are many fun ways to determine the turn order in combat in your favorite role-playing games, and some initiative methods are just better suited to different group sizes and playstyles. So today, we are going to check out a bunch of fun ways to roll initiative, and I want to get out of this tube. So, we are going to talk about 6 popular initiative methods that I have tested for D&D or other RPGs, but that's not all. Then we'll talk about 4 more initiative methods from new RPGs that I just haven't tried yet, and finally I'll tell you about the 2 homebrew initiative methods that my own group has been using for the last several months in D&D 5e and Dungeon Crawl Classics. And out of these dozen-ish initiative methods, I'm confident you'll come away with something new and fun to try at your table. Because I'm Bob, this is where we learn how to have more fun playing RPGs together, and now it's time to roll, and actually not for this first one. And we're just gonna sit over here, because I hauled a ton of freaking books out here today. Freestyle initiative. In short, this is similar to the turn order you already use for most of your role-playing game session. Generally, outside of combat, each player, including the game master, acts whenever it makes sense for their character to do so, and in my experience, just by adding a little more guidance, this method is ideal for keeping your combat fast and smooth for small groups. 2 fun fantasy RPGs that use a sort of freestyle initiative method by default are Into the Odd and Easy D6, and the latter spells it out like this. Who goes first? Unless the heroes are surprised by the enemy, all the heroes take their turns first, and then the enemies go. Heroes can go in any order. Make sure everyone gets a turn, and then the game master gets a turn moving and attacking with all the enemies. So even shorter, the PCs go first in whatever order they want, then monsters. That's exactly how I ran an entire D&D 5e campaign with a small group of 1 to 3 players, and it is still my go-to initiative methods for groups of that size. But with more players, I prefer a little more structure, like one of these next few methods. Dramatic initiative. This method is very close to freestyle, where player characters usually act first, and they can go in any order they choose based on the unfolding drama of the scene. But what makes this method extra dramatic is a fun change to the Game Master's turn order. The most popular fantasy RPG to use this style is Daggerheart, so let's summarize their rule for it. Moves in combat. Since Daggerheart relies on a flexible back and forth conversation between the GM and the players, combat has no initiative order, no rounds, and no distinct number of actions you can take on your turn. Instead, fights play out narratively, moment to moment, just like non-combat scenes. This provides the players opportunities to team up together in their tactics, respond appropriately to narrative changes in the scene, and not be locked into violence once the first strike happens. The GM can make a GM move at nearly any time, most commonly when a PC rolls with fear or fails an action roll. So, ignoring the terminology, the Game Master takes a turn right after a player character, about 50% of the time or more, really leaning into that flexible back and forth conversation we use for the rest of the game. And in my limited experience running Daggerheart so far, this worked super well for a small group of 2 player characters, but we each felt like it could be tricky to run with our normal 4 to 6. However, I did play a session of Daggerheart with 5 player characters, and it was great, and obviously, the man himself, Matty Mercer, is making it work pretty perfectly with their usual 7+ players, which I personally consider to be a large group that would work best with a different method. But whilst we're talking about Daggerheart and Critical Role, let's check out the Critical Role artist who made this custom portrait of my own character and is sponsoring this portion of the video. Aaron Angiolini of the Art Venturing Guild on Patreon, an ever-growing collection of high-quality, high-fantasy character art perfect for your campaigns in Daggerheart, 5e, and more, and also gets you priority access for private commissions of your own characters. Aaron was even gracious enough to give away a free pack of 3 NPC portraits, including my character Hantu, the Orc Barbarian. Oh wait, I meant to show this. Check that out. Did it myself, yeah. So just check out the link below where you'll have the option to sign up for their newsletter. You don't have to, but you should, because that includes info on even more free portraits. They're very generous, and it's just the easiest way to show some support for a real human artist. Thanks again, Aaron, and thank you as we circle on back to Clockwise Initiative. This one is almost self-explanatory. Yes, you go in order around the table, but there are a few notable variations you can put on this method, so I counted this as more than one. For example, Nimble 5e uses Clockwise Initiative, but it overlaps with Freestyle and Dramatic Initiative. Quote, "When combat begins, by default, heroes go first. Whichever player is ready first, or whichever makes the most sense story-wise, goes first, with play proceeding around the table clockwise. The GM can hold all the monsters' turns to the end of the round or interweave their turns between the heroes' turns as the story demands." Pretty loose versus default Shadow Dark, taking Clockwise Initiative to the extreme. Shadow Dark RPG is played in turn order right from the start. At the beginning of the game, the GM establishes initiative, or the turn order in which players act. Everyone rolls a d20 and adds their dex modifier. The GM adds the highest dex modifier of any monsters, if relevant. The person who rolled the highest takes the first turn, and turn order moves clockwise from that individual. So in this case, the scene doesn't determine the first move, the dice do, and then you stay in that order for everything. However, Shadow Dark also defines a free-form method immediately after that, where the GM just makes sure everyone got a turn to act, and once they do, a new round begins. And like many parts of Shadow Dark, we can be pretty sure these initiative methods were inspired by Index Card RPG. Good book flip that time. Always turns? Turns give a session structure and an energetic pace, but if it feels weird to play in turns, maybe during roleplay, just go freeform. Who goes first? When a new action scene begins, everyone at the table rolls a d20, highest roll goes first, then clockwise. Pray the GM doesn't win. And you can also see how ICRPG partially inspired yet another version of Clockwise Initiative in Professor DM's Deathbringer. Rounds are 6 seconds, group initiative every round, d6, highest roll wins. Ties equal simultaneous attack, players take turns clockwise from the GM. Again, I personally think Clockwise Initiative is the best method for large groups of 7 or more players, where any sort of randomized player order can take a minute to establish and organize and track consistently through each round, and where freestyle, again, at a large size, just feels a bit too free for me and hard to track who's gone already, who hasn't gone, and oh, I forgot to have that monster go last round. So overall, I really like Clockwise Initiative. It's clear, well, it is clear, and it is clear why almost every board game and card game in existence just has players go in order around the table. And my default method for a while, even with my normal-sized group of 5 players, was basically how Nimble describes it, where the first character to act in the scene naturally begins combat that round, or if there's no clear first blood, then we do something like Shadow Dark's version, where everyone just rolls a quick dex check and we start with who's highest and then go around. However, my players really like sitting in the same seats every week, and some characters are just usually the first to act. So then some other characters are usually stuck at the end of the round, and even alternating between clockwise and counterclockwise wasn't quite fixing that problem for us. Ultimately, my group prefers a more freeform and random turn order, and we'll get to that later. But next, we got to talk about a classic method which also partially inspired Professor DM's Deathbringer. Side initiative. As far as I know, this is the first dice-based initiative method ever prescribed in a Dungeons & Dragons rulebook, starting with Moldvay Basic back in 1981. The rule is simple. Initiative. To determine initiative, each side rolls 1d6, the DM rolls for monsters. The side with the higher roll may move first and attack first in combat for that round. Both sides should roll for initiative each round. If both sides tie on their initiative rolls and combat is simultaneous, it is possible for both sides to be killed. So once again, we're kind of back to freestyle initiative where the PCs all go together and choose their own order, but instead of the heroes always going first, we make one contested roll to see if the monsters get to start. this is the default for other fun and simple RPGs like Knave, Maze Rats, Skate Wizards, and other early editions of D&D. And did I really lug like all these out here to show it for a second? But like I said, having the player side go freeform is usually best for 3 or fewer players in my experience. Maybe I just need to try this more though, because I really like the idea of these common simultaneous turns where a PC and a monster might knock each other out. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Now, fast forwarding to 3rd edition D&D and beyond, we reach the familiar initiative method you know and love, or maybe know but think is just okay or not that good, which is why you're watching this video. I call it ranked initiative. It is the default for D&D 5e, Tales of the Valiant, Pathfinder, Dungeon Crawl Classics, and more. Everybody rolls a dexterity check or agility in DCC and then goes in order from highest to lowest result. The pros are getting a new initiative order for each battle based on both the character's reaction time and sheer luck. The cons are mainly that it's kind of awkward to quickly have every player roll, announce their result, and then organize all the names and ranks of each combatant, even if you have groups of similar monsters going together. This drudgery, right at the start of combat, is why every VTT automates ranked initiative. It's why there's an entire market of clips and cards and tokens for initiative trackers, and it's why even D&D just added the option of passive initiative in the brand new 2024 Player's Handbook. From the rules glossary, initiative sometimes a DM might have combatants use their initiative scores instead of rolling initiative. Your initiative score equals 10 plus your dexterity modifier. If you have advantage on initiative rolls, increase your initiative score by 5. If you have disadvantage on those rolls, decrease that score by 5. Regardless, I do think rolling ranked initiative is a fun method for small and normal-sized groups. A few years ago when I made a video about initiative, my suggestion for normal-sized groups of 4 to 6 players was to roll a ranked initiative as usual, but to just have all the monsters go on turn 11, since that is the average D20 roll for a group anyway. A lot of people like the idea, though many decided to use it as 11 plus dex of the fastest monster, or just to always have the boss go on 20, but basically using a passive initiative for monsters and then a rolled initiative for players. So when it comes to this familiar ranked initiative, it mostly comes down to play style. Remember, these days, players like my group just don't want to be stuck in the same order round after round, no matter how we determined it. But before I share our 2 current homebrew initiative methods, I want to make this exploration of initiative more complete by sharing a few more ideas from other RPGs that I haven't tried yet, but they seem really cool. So be sure to comment about your experience with these methods especially, or whatever method your group likes best. Maybe we can see which is the most popular initiative method based on the comments or likes on comments or something. In any case, all that stuff will help this video reach more people, so thank you. Now, if I had to make up a name for this new initiative method in the 0.9 beta playtest of DC20, I would probably call it Ranked Dramatic Initiative. As I understand it, DC20 players roll an initiative check and take turns in ranked order, like in 5e. However, they also want to beat an initiative DC for that battle, so their side will get to go first. Otherwise, one of the monsters goes first, and regardless, players and monsters just alternate turns, with the GM deciding when monsters should act based on how the battle unfolds, kinda like Daggerheart's dramatic initiative, but the monster's initiative ranks are locked in after that first round. And DC20's creator even gave me a little exclusive news that he's primarily been using a variant rule, where after that initiative check to see which side goes first, the players do just choose their own order, still alternating with the monsters, but not ranked based on the roll. Funny enough, because I just learned this and I don't know if Coach knows either, but the MCDM RPG, aka Draw Steel, just released a playtest pack with a pretty similar method, which I'm calling Dramatic Side Initiative. Just one player, or the GM, rolls a single D10. If it's 6 or higher, no matter who rolled it, a player character goes first. Otherwise, a monster goes first. And regardless, players and monsters just alternate turns, with the players choosing their own order and the GM deciding when monsters should act based on how the battle unfolds. Frankly, I love to see this as yet another fast and free-form rule being embraced by this game marketed as a tactical RPG, because it seems like too many people, on the internet anyway, believe that tactics can only emerge from extremely granular rules, but here we have Draw Steel and DC-20, to some degree, suggesting an even more fluid and rules-light version of initiative than Daggerheart, because they're letting your tactics grow from the scene itself instead of forcing them through your character sheet. That's cool. Oh, and here's somebody else walking around now. I think this guy's carrying a tambourine. Yeah, he's got a bandana and a tambourine. Okay, so maybe I'm not the weirdest person out here today. Cool. But then we get a perhaps more traditionally tactical, yet theater of mind friendly method for initiative from the One Ring RPG. I'm even forgetting to bring out the books now. But it's a great looking book, so I gotta show it. I brought it all this way. Stance Initiative, where combat typically starts with one or more rounds of ranged volleys as the two sides close the distance. Then, the player side goes first in melee, where each PC acts in an order of their chosen stance for that round, where stances are like a combination of your position on the battlefield and your tactics for that round. A forward stance gives your attacks a bonus, but also gives a bonus to attacks against you as you brazenly charge into battle. An open stance has no pros or cons, and a defensive stance is the opposite of forward, giving a penalty to your attacks and attacks against you. Finally, a rearward stance is a ranged attack, so you're not in melee and you go last. Then, the monsters can attack without stances in any order. So not having run it yet, it sounds a little tricky, but stances also feel like a fun solution for establishing the turn order, establishing positions on the battlefield, and choosing these tactical bonuses or penalties all at once without needing a map. But I'll have to try it out, just as I am well overdue to try out the initiative system introduced by Volume 1, Crown and Skull. Phase Initiative. Broadly similar to the stances of the One Ring, the phases of Crown and Skull essentially allow each player to choose their rank order in initiative, but in this case, it's just Phase 1 through 5, and it's locked in for the entire battle. Monsters also have phases pre-assigned in their stat blocks, with more powerful monsters acting in up to 3 different phases each round, and there are 2 huge intensifiers here. A combat doesn't necessarily start in Phase 1, so it's not always great to choose Phase 1. And B, any player character who goes down during the round will die, capital D die, at the end of Phase 5. So you really must strategize when your tank goes versus your healer, etc. And the testimonial for this is whenever I hear people talking about Crown and Skull, it's usually about how this initiative system changed their psyche on combat forever. And that sort of checks out, because I've said it before, but this publisher, Runehammer, is usually thinking a few years ahead of everybody else, hence how their game Index Card RPG already shaped parts of Shadowdark and Deathbringer, which came out years later. However, like I mentioned earlier, my group is in a phase where we like to be able to switch up initiative order from round to round, so the 2 homebrew methods we've been using for about the last 6 months are very simple and very random. Card Initiative. Probably needs a better name, but it is exactly what it sounds like. Each player and each monster is represented by a card, and we use this cool RPG deck with classes and monsters on them. But at the start of each round of combat, the GM shuffles, draws, and you go when your card comes up. Of course, this means we're not bothering with individual bonus points to initiative, but if an item or a spell or other feature grants initiative, or grants advantage on initiative, that creature gets 2 cards in the deck, and then just goes whenever the first one comes up. Easily my group's favorite method, and I also really liked it as a player when my wife, Grace World Destroyer, was running a D&D 5e campaign. But as a GM, I personally found it a little awkward remembering which card represents which enemy, because they don't have exact names on the cards that we have anyway, and then remembering to take the enemies out of the rotation once they're defeated, and remembering to shuffle in that last round or the last turn before the new round and get it all ready in time. Maybe if another player were just running that for me, that would be fine, but as the GM, I don't want to be like shuffling around with some tool to determine initiative. So in my current campaign running Dungeon Crawl Classics, I have been using a variation of my old technique. A group of monsters always goes on turn 11, because that's the average roll, and players still technically roll initiative. But instead of using a separate initiative check that's only used to determine this turn order, we jump right into combat, with every player making their action roll for that round, and then just going in order from highest to lowest roll for their action. It keeps the game moving pretty quickly because all my players have to decide their next action by the start of the round, and all the low rolls with missed attacks are just naturally consolidated at the end of the round. So we just skip them, and then everyone rolls for their next action. And we keep the actions flexible such that if a player wanted to attack a particular monster, but then that monster went down before their turn, the player can still use whatever they rolled on a different monster as long as it would still hit their AC. Then as the GM, all my monsters are still making their attack rolls on turn 11, but if it's just like 1 to 3 monsters, I usually roll their attack initiative the same way as the players, because in that case, the turn order is much more significant and much easier to track since it's not a big group. I like it, but it's still not perfect because DCC spellcasters and thieves can burn stats to dramatically improve their action rolls, which would often put them at the top, so we reverted to just using the flat result on the die to determine the player's turn order, and then they add their modifiers during their attack. And of course, D&D 5e spellcasters don't always need to roll, but if you wanted to try this method in D&D 5e, you could just have them make a spell check anyway. Or, if your players are really cool, maybe they'd agree to have that roll determine their saving throw DC for that particular casting. So let me know your ideas down in the comments, and please like this video if you found it interesting. Thanks again to our sponsor, Aaron Angiolini, for the free artwork, and to the Bob World Builder patrons for allowing me to do what I do. And thank you for being cool. Keep building. And now I gotta pack up all these books before Tambourine Man comes back.